level up your knowledge with these.
Oh, you filthy swines! Get in here, sit down. We're going to read some more news. You might like it. There can be some great learning experiences using smartphones, but also the potential for brain rot and other nasty things might end up trickling through into your child's mind. So with this article on the New York Times, written by Molly Worthen, you can't game your way to a real education. I remember when I had my Mega Drive Genesis, whatever you want to call it, there was a series of games called Carmen Sandiego that were edutainment, and they looked kind of good on the surface, but then when you scratched that surface and went deeper, it was all trying to teach you stuff. And all I wanted to do was bloody well play some games and not be bothered by all this learning of stuff. It's very boring. The best games, I feel, actually are quite educational, so we'll see what this article says. Dr. Worthen is a professor of history at the University of North Carolina. Chapter Hill is the author of Spellbound, How Charisma Shaped American History from the Puritans to Donald Trump. Paige Drygas, who teaches high school English at a private school just north of Dallas, feels no pressure to make learning fun. She distinguishes between fun, meaning stress-free amusement, and the burden she feels to get students engaged as much as possible. I can see it in their eye contact, she told me, and trying to get their minds going. For example, I don't think many people would describe Emerson and Thoreau as fun. Maybe that's why some teachers have their students play Walden, a video game in which players simulate Thoreau's solitary sojourn at Walden Pond. The game is free for teachers, but Miss Drygas sticks to the texts. The idea of self-reliance is really interesting. Once you engage that big idea, class moves quickly. Ms. Drygas, it's quite a name, isn't it? Drygas. It sounds a little bit wrong. Sorry, love. She also requires her students to handwrite their essays, read books in hard copy, and use laptops as little as possible. These countercultural classroom policies all go together because fun used to be a wonderful thing in school. When screens came to dominate instruction time and software developers answered the call to make school fun and personalize learning with the growing marketplace of online games. This has been the greatest blunder in the past decade for K-12 education. The decision to give every child a personal computer and to gamify everything from standardized test preparation to recess. Mistaken ideas about the nature of learning have combined with a hefty dose of big tech propaganda to distort our picture of what school is for. Technology must return to its proper place in the classroom as a supplemental tool rather than the source and summit of education. Back in my day, when I was a piglet, the computers we had access to were so crappy nobody bothered using them. It's like, what are those over there? When did you buy them? Why are they there? Besides, so the thinking goes, kids today are digital natives because they've grown up around screens. Their brains must be fundamentally different from those of older generations. Teachers need to meet them where they are, by catering to shorter attention spans and swapping books for multimedia lessons. The more the math and language assignments resemble a video game, the more students will learn. I think the key there is supplementary. I think, in my opinion, having these things as the foundation of learning perhaps is not going to be as helpful. You need to attack learning from multiple angles, I would have assumed, from the boring directions and the exciting ones. Every step in this argument is wrong. Researchers have begun to correlate falling test scores in wealthy countries around the world with aggressive adoption of devices in schools. 88% of American public schools now follow what is known as the 1-to-1 policy, providing one laptop or tablet for every student. In the United States, math and reading scores among 13-year-olds peaked in 2012 and have declined since. The analogy between the workplace and the classroom ignores the fact that young people learn differently from adults. They need far more direction and exposure to a variety of sensory activities. Also, I would say boys and girls learn very differently compared to each other. I would say most of the education systems we have at the moment seem to be very female-orientated. That's just my opinion, though. Perhaps that means sand and blocks in younger grades. For me, history came alive through the homemade costumes of a medieval times fair in high school, especially the memorable sensory activities of trying to make my timeline project look really medieval by soaking it in tea and browning it in the oven, where it caught fire. I then spent hours recreating it. My quest to simulate ancient vellum may have been a little eccentric, but my basic mental wiring wasn't. The concept of a digital native is a myth. The advent of iPhones and laptops did not undo eons of brain evolution in the space of a few years, even if excessive screen time is associated with thinning of the cerebral cortex. Blimey, is it? I'm not sure that's true, but I'm going to keep reading. The damage appears to be reversible thanks to the brain's plasticity. I think it's the kind of games that people are playing and not necessarily games in and of themselves. People are mistaking kids' preferences for deep biological reality. Jared Cooney Horvath, a neuroscientist who consults with schools on a digital policy, told me. My daughter loves popsicles. I have a choice. I could meet her where she's at and start every meal with a popsicle. But that doesn't change the fact that biologically popsicles aren't good for her, and she needs some vegetables. We tried carrot popsicles, maybe? It's just a frozen something, frozen fruit. I've had some really good ones in the past that have been actually quite healthy. In his new book, The Digital Delusions, Dr. Horvath surveys the vast body of research demonstrating the damage to learning that comes with overuse of so-called ed tech, the mass of digital devices and software that have saturated schools. Studies indicate that comprehension collapses when students read texts on screens. Their attention spans shrivel as well. A study of college students working on laptops during a lecture class found that they spent an average of 38 minutes every hour off task. And even in the age of Google, old-fashioned memorization remains important. Knowledge stored in our brains, not in the cloud, is the seedbed for creative thinking. Perhaps the most insidious aspect of EdTech's invasion is the widespread adoption of video game-style apps to teach, assess, and entertain students. These apps feed a broader ethos of gamification that encourages students to fixate on points, badges, and other digital dopamine hits, and shy away from the experimentation, frustration, and struggle that real learning demands. I think the issue really is encouraging students to find an interest in a subject such that they will continue learning it in their own time. And perhaps gamifying things is hiding that. The game becomes interesting and not necessarily the subject they're studying, maybe. The problem is not the games themselves. Good teachers have always used games to motivate students and connect them with classmates. But over the past 15 years or so, the hubbub of active analog games has given way to far quieter classrooms where students spend significant blocks of time in headphones, swiping and scrolling through on-screen activities. The company Kahoot says that 8 million teachers worldwide use its quiz games for future-ready skill building. About 17 million students, roughly one-third of American students from pre-K through 12th grade, use iReady, a digital platform that promises an active experience that motivates students to take ownership of their learning. If students get to school early or bad weather keeps them inside at recess, they can kill time with iReady games like Hungry Fish, an arithmetic game, or Cupcake, a virtual cupcake business that requires math and map reading. In some cases, the more they play, the more credits they earn to unlock new games. The curriculum giant McGraw-Hill offers a mobile study app called Sharpen, which chops up lessons into bite-sized videos and quizzes. Cartoon avatars and bursts of animation confetti encourage users to keep up your streak and earn new rewards. Denise Champney is a speech pathologist in Rhode Island who has worked in public schools for 25 years, mainly with neurodivergent learners. The persuasive design of computer games is meant to keep kids using with no interaction with other people, just with a screen, she told me. I've seen it with the iReady Math. They're just clicking, they want to get through it, they're not reading because they don't really need to read. They say, I know what they're asking, so I'll click on what I think the answer is. They're cheating in a sense. The overuse of online games and screen-based technology in general may be especially harmful to students with ADHD and autism. I kind of think that most boys have ADHD, and I think it's perhaps diagnosed excessively, far too much, which is also another way of saying excessively. Shut up now, let's keep going. These students master narrow pattern recognition instead of working on skills they need, like reading, writing, and multisensory engagement. Ms. Champney said she's noticed that they also use laptops to escape from challenging social situations. Kids bring these devices from class to class, and if they struggle with an interaction, they'll just pull out their computer and play video games. Multiplayer games do not necessarily encourage healthy social skills. Ing Epsing, a principal of McPherson Middle School in central Kansas, recalled the final day of a school 2 years ago when an all-grade online rock, paper, scissors tournament devolved into the Lord of the Flies. I don't think I've ever seen so much lying, cheating, meanness, or crying. Miss Esping told me it was the worst last day ever. We had to end the game early. The school made headlines this year by abandoning the one-to-one laptop policy mainly at the behest of teachers, who argued that gravely limiting time on technology will be a positive step for the students. Miss Esping said, "Every kind of learning requires facing uncomfortable situations, navigating ambiguity, and coping with failure, whether the subject is group dynamics at recess or the details of cell biology. Too often, online games provide friction-free pseudo-engagement, cultivating a narrow set of skills and encourage the assumption that all questions have a single correct answer. The more varied the context in which you apply a skill, the broader that skill becomes. But computers are wickedly narrow," Dr. Horvath, the neuroscientist, said. "Students get good at the game and their score will go up, but as soon as you take them off the screen, most of those skills will go." Oh no. Emily Churkin, who works with families and schools as the screen time consultant, taught middle school English for 12 years before her frustration with technology as a teacher and a parent turned her into an accidental activist, she told me. When you gamify lessons, you're not enhancing learning, but holding students' attention so they can engage with a product longer. That's at odds with child development. Children should not be spending hours on the screen. Ms. Churkin also worries about the student data that edtech companies collect, often without parents' knowledge. She's the lead plaintiff in a class action lawsuit against the software company Power School, whose 2024 security breach affected millions of children and teachers, exposing personal information to hackers who demanded extortion payments from schools. Ms. Churkin doesn't oppose technology outright. "I'm not anti-tech, I just want schools to be tech-intentional," she said. "Of course, kids should learn how technology works, but that is very different from giving 6-year-olds an iPad to learn how to read." In my conversations with the growing community of parents, teachers, and researchers who criticize EdTech, no one seemed to share my enthusiasm for going back to vellum and quills. It's a bit far, a bit too far in that direction, although I never really used computers when I was at school. It was all fountain pens and cursive writing. I don't think they do that now. The solution instead is thoughtful moderation. Schools should drop the one-to-one policy that has encouraged students to see their laptops and tablets as extensions of themselves. Digital games can be effective tools as long as they emphasize collaboration, creativity, and risk-taking rather than lonely scrolling for the next dopamine hit. I'm intrigued, warily, by Skylar Carr's approach. He co-founded Mission IO after a few years working in charter schools. As a STEM specialist, he tried to reach students who were struggling to be engaged in a traditional classroom environment, he told me. Mission IO creates simulations that embed common core grade level standards in dramatic scenarios that inject real-life stakes into class material. Mission IO is trying to do gamification the right way. For example, if a 6th grade teacher uses the company's program to test students on molecular biology, we encourage the teacher to say, "We'll be learning about particles and compounds, and you need to know this stuff because tomorrow we're going on a mission. If you don't know it, we won't succeed. We want you to introduce it with an understanding that it's got purpose," Mr. Carr said. On mission day, students learned that a nearby lab has suffered a dangerous chemical leak, leaving a researcher trapped. They split into teams and analyzed data on airborne molecules in different parts of the lab to figure out which atom they can change to make the floating molecules non-toxic. Mission IO's online interface is full of cool graphics and adaptive, choose-your-own-adventure style storylines. We've got some amazing artists who were unfulfilled making skins for video games, Mr. Carr said. But the point is to get students on their feet and moving around the classroom, sharing information and brainstorming solutions face to face. Laptops become tools for in-person collaboration rather than private gaming consoles. If, and it's a big if, players resist the temptations of the internet, you can have a local network at the school, which is probably, I would imagine, the best idea instead of having unfettered access to the internet. I remember when I was at high school, we had access to CD-ROMs. We had access to something called Encarta, which was almost like Wikipedia. It was fun, but you could have a local area network that had limited access. At the end of a mission, students and teachers evaluate both the outcome and the process. You can fail the mission and still get good scores on collaboration and critical thinking, Mr. Carr said. That's enlightening for kids who are used to failing. It can open up their minds about how they should be working. Mr. Carr and his colleagues have made one decision that sets Mission IO apart from many edtech companies. Their funding comes from foundation grants and the schools that purchase their programs. We had a chance to bring on investors early, and it was an intense conversation. But we knew venture capital and the expectations, he said. He had seen investors acquire other games and prioritize profit over education. We need to be able to let schools call the shots, he said. To call the right shots, however, teachers, administrators, and families need a clear vision on what education is for. It's no accident that American schools fell hard and fast for ed tech, while the old consensus about what it means to be college and career ready was unraveling. For decades, culture war debates over American history and science curriculums have consumed public schools. At the same time, many researchers have called the Common Core national curriculum standards a failure. Even private schools now struggle to define their purpose. To figure out what the mismatch of personal taste and identity categories should replace the politically incorrect Western canon. Hang on a minute there. Ooh, I'm not sure I agree with you there, love. No. What's going on there? The politically incorrect Western canon. Well, I suppose that's your opinion. I think the problem is every nation out there, or every cultural collective has their own canon. Whether you agree with it or not is up to you, I suppose. But, whatever. It's an opinion you express there. Not on you. Even highly educated parents don't put a lot of thought into the deeper purpose of school. Ms. Drygas, the English teacher in Texas, said they just think about how to get their kids into whatever college they want to get to. So it has to be comforting to think that everyone can still agree on one thing. The more innovation, the better. Most schools have no gilding ballast anymore, Dr. Horvath told me. Tech filled that void for a while, but no technology is philosophically neutral. The apps and games that provide a simulacrum of educational progress also encourage students to absorb a certain worldview, an idea of what they should strive for. They end up with the impression that learning is a matter of box ticking, pattern recognition, completing discrete tasks, and leveling up. Yes, it ends up becoming mimetic mimicry, so they're not actually understanding what they're doing. They're just aping what they've been taught. When they get to college and face open-ended essay questions and other forms of ambiguity, when they begin thinking about what they should do after graduation and try to figure out the point of it all, they panic. When a professor asks them to read an entire novel, the task feels overwhelming. They got into college by mastering a gamified system, but that's a false picture of the world. Take it from Emerson, he wrote in Self-Reliance that real education requires a person to learn that there is no algorithm for fulfillment. Exactly, the pursuit of happiness and not the attainment of it is the goal. Though the wide universe is full of good, no kernel of nourishing corn can come to him but through his toil. Serious intellectual work and moral reasoning cannot be gamified. That's a very well written article, and I agree with 99% of what you said there. I think just because something is engaging isn't necessarily going to be an indication of its value for education. And I think a lot of these apps, as Molly mentioned, are encouraging children to check boxes and not actually dig into the deeper meaning of what those boxes really mean, you know? But there are interactive educational tools that are very useful, particularly in science. There's a lot of simulations out there, sandbox simulations that are very useful. I've got one based on the solar system, actually, on Steam. That's pretty cool. But there are others out there. So I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think there are definitely interactive tools out there that are useful. I used to work for a company making edutainment-based games, and they were pretty good, and they have their place. But as the sole foundation of engaging these students and educating them, it's not going to cover all the bases, definitely. And I would argue perhaps not having devices within school time is probably the best way to go. Maybe just keeping them within one class, like it used to be. But then again, I'm an old fart pig, so what do I know? Lovely article there. Thank you very much. Let's give a thumbs up to Molly Warthen. That's it for now. Thank you for joining me wherever you are. Make sure you hit that like button, pretty please. The only thing I have left to say is Pigwig out.
Oink, oinkity, snort. Snuffle, snuffle, squeak, oink, oink, wee. Squeal, snort, snort, oink, kitty, squeak. Oink, 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 squeak, squeak, wee, wee, wee. Snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinky, oink, snort, snort, squeak. Oink, 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 wee, 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 wee. Oh! Snort, snuffle, oink, squeak, squeal, wee, snort, oinky, oinkity, oink, oink. Snuffle, wee, squeak, snort, oink, squeal. Oink, 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 squeak, squeak, wee, wee, wee. Snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinky, oink, snort, snort, squeak. Oink, 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 wee, 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 wee. Oh! Oink, oinkity, snort, snuffle, snuffle, squeak. Oinkity, oink, oink. Snuffle, wee, squeak, snort, oink, squeal. Oink, 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 squeak, squeak, wee, wee, wee. Snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinky, oink, snort, snort, squeak. Oink, 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 wee, 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 wee. Oh! Squeal, squeal. Snort, shuffle, oink, re-squeal, re-snort, oinky, oinkity, oink, 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 snuffle, re-squeeze, snort, oink, squeal, oink, oink, oinkity, squeeze, squeeze, re-re-re, snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinky, oink, snort, snort, squeak, oink, 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 oink,